This is Layla, and this is her story. Layla was a dog that lived in Minnesota. She was 4 years old when she died. The cause of her death is simple: algae poisoning. Algae is a toxic plant that lives on water. It harms and poisons us and our pets. Layla met her demise in Minnesota, but it could easily have taken place in Vermont. Algae is the result of the excess of nutrients such as phosphorus and nitrogen, plus warm water temperatures.
Phosphorus and nitrogen and potassium are the three big nutrients that become runoff, but when they become a problem is when there's too much of them in the system. And the main source of them is from fertilizers that are used on farm fields, but they also do occur naturally. When rain falls onto the surface of the land anywhere in our watershed, little molecules that are on the soil attach to the water molecules, and they flow into the system of little brooks and rivers that flow into the lake.
I think in order to understand why the lake is polluted in the first place, you have to understand what people came here and have done. You know, that they've come and cut down a lot of the trees that would have existed here, and they've turned a lot of the land around the lake into farmland. And that's what drives a lot of the phosphorus, I think, pollution that we have to deal with in the lake.
So I'm Andrew Silverman. I am a junior at CVU, and I am 16 years old, and I made a blue-green algae treatment buoy when I was in sophomore year at the age of 15. One of the original things we'd planned to do was just to go with a sensor buoy and leave it at that. Then we discovered that those already existed, and we couldn't figure out a way to improve on the design, so we decided to take a more proactive look at it. And that was the point where Jack got involved, because we were trying to figure out the easiest way to get it out. First, we went with a scoop method, but then discovered that that did not specifically target blue-green algae at all, and that we're more likely to pick up green algae than blue-green algae. And then once we scooped it up, we had no good way of killing it without, then dumping the remains back into the water. And since the toxin associated with blue-green algae does not die with the algae, it can linger in the water for several weeks afterwards, that was not a great plan. So we decided to go with the phycomycin alternative because it was the cleanest that we could find without leaving the water polluted for an undue amount of time.
If you have 100,000 cows that calve a little less than once a year, so we'll just assume that they each have a calf in a year, and half of them are bull calves. So that would be 50,000 bull calves that have to go somewhere.
The average age of a dairy cow in the United States is 42 months. They don't even use years because they don't get that far.
It's been a degree of deflection to say, well, the industry's changing itself, so we don't need to pass the law, and well, there's a handful of these that operate in Vermont anyway, so is it really that big of a problem? My answer to that is, if something's wrong and it shouldn't exist, and you either think it doesn't exist or it doesn't exist that much in the state, what is the harm with passing a law saying you shall not do this?
It's not good. It's not good, it's not humane, it's not right.
There's been a reliance on the impression that Vermont doesn't have the scale of problems, so there isn't the need for legislation. And I think there's also a viewpoint that industry will respond to consumer changes, and they will fix problems themselves, and they don't need a law to tell them to do that.
You have to put yourself into the kids' shoe, and then you can understand them.
People should like treat them equally, and like when they first got here, like they should treat it like good and not bad.
It doesn't matter who that person, where is he's coming, or what is the background for him. Education is for everyone.
It was really hard. Like I started 7th grade, and like the class I started, I knew nobody. There was no one in my language who was there, so it was really, really hard for me for my first year.
Sometimes I have no idea to understand what the teacher said, and I have no idea to understand what they're doing sometimes.
We know that there are changes we can make to curricula, be more culturally responsive. Kids are inspired when they can see themselves. And if every book you read doesn't talk about children like yourself, it's harder to see yourself in that curriculum. If it doesn't acknowledge the contributions of people with whom you identify in history, it's harder to feel yourself being part of that journey. And we also know that frankly, in chaotic times, there may be ways we need to, work a little harder to be supportive of students.
I had my first job as a nurse's aide, and people were referred to as crazy, lunatics. And there's good mental illnesses and bad mental illnesses. Schizophrenia, depression, manic depressive disorder, drug addiction, alcoholism, borderline personality disorder. Those were just the adjectives that were used. It's whether people realize they're talking about people in that way or not.
Because I think that there's this myth about mental health. That's for crazy people. And if you go to a mental health counselor, it means you're crazy. And they're going to judge you, and they're going to tell you what's wrong with you, and they're going to tell you what to do. And I want no part of that.
Let's not label her. Let's not look at it. She's different. She's struggling.
We're all the same.
Yeah,
we are all the same.
What is gender bias?
I don't know.
I actually don't know.
I don't know how to answer that.
Well, now there's this perception of, oh, women are equal, what more could they want? But there's still plenty of areas in which women are discriminated against.
A lot of unintentional bias that ends up affecting how we see gender roles in society.
As teachers, we all have our own implicit bias that we really need to examine and look at, and in terms of treating different students in different ways based on their gender.
It's really striking to see girls be super confident when they're young and in elementary school, and then that starts to dissipate as they get into middle school and high school. And I think that often girls who are assertive and girls who are confident are given negative messages.
I think it plays out for the students too, in the ways that they treat each other and in the ways that they think about their own abilities, or the ways they think about what they might be naturally good at or naturally not good at, based on the perceptions they have of their own gender and kind of the expectations that are placed on their gender roles in society.
To prepare you for college.
To prepare people for college.
To prepare students for college.
To prepare you to succeed in life.
Our generation is packed full of great thinkers. In Vermont, there are currently around 28,000 high school-age students, and the vast majority of these students are in school to chase their future. We have so many creative, innovative problem solvers, yet for the most part, the school system is not allowing them to create, innovate, or problem solve. If the goal of school really is to prepare us for the real world, what will that world expect of us?
I was not prepared to call to speak with the principal and go in and meet and be told that they weren't equipped to handle a child like mine and to not enroll them. She's seeking an education, a safe place, and I'm not going to send her anywhere where she's not safe. You can't even understand how to address my child. Tell me you don't have the capacity to deal with. All you need is empathy, compassion, and an open mind. She's a kid like anyone else. I promise you.
It's really good to have confidence in yourself, and I've learned that over the years, that I was thinking about what other people thought of me, and eventually I just stopped caring what people thought. I cared about them using the right pronouns for me, but I was like, if I see a suit and tie at the store, I'm gonna wear it, and I'm gonna rock it, and I'm gonna go into school and wear it. I don't care what people are gonna say. It's really about knowing yourself and loving yourself.
Heinsberg Community School has made such immense strides concerning transgender inclusivity. But why is there such a gap between Karen and Francis's stories? How can these two school communities be so different within our small state? And how do we go about bridging this gap? It is our responsibility as educators, as parents, as students, administrators, leaders, and members of our community to ensure that every child is safe, supported, and celebrated within our schools. Our legacy is not our history. It is not the things that will be written in books or engraved in stone. Our legacy lies not in the past, but in our future and in the path we clear for generations to come. Our legacy is what we do for each other in our community. It is the lessons we teach our children and the difference we make for those we love. A legacy of acceptance and friendship will not be forgotten. What kind of legacy will you leave?